Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por participar una vez
Morning,
más.
everybody. Thanks for being here with us once again in the cycle Ask Me Anything. Today, we're going to be working as usual. First of all, I will introduce the speakers, and then we're going to have a short presentation of the topics. And after that, we have a Q&A session. So in order to do that, please open your mics. So with no further ado, so Gonzalo, now you have the floor. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Gonzalo, and I'm part of the R+D engineer department here in GeneXus. Hello, my name is Yvette Gonzalez. I'm a technical training coordinator in GeneXus. I'm in charge of pre-sales department in Mexico. Hello, I'm Graciela Liston. I work at the technical support department, and I work in North America and Central America. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Eugenio Garcia. I'm part of the research and development department in GeneXus, and together with Gonzalo, we are part of the team. And we are in charge of developing all those aspects related to GeneXus BPM suite. And the idea is basically to listen to your presentation, to listen to your questions about this suite. But before moving on to the Q&A, we prepared some slides to share with you so that we can have a short introduction to the topic. And this all is about our BPM suite. So first, we're going to have a presentation, and then we move on to the Q&A question session. Something that we have learned during the pandemic is that all those companies that didn't have their processes digitalized now couldn't do what we did, in fact, of having all our workers working remotely. We have talked to different partners and clients on all these contexts where everybody is working remotely, basically showed that some activities were harder to do than before the pandemic, because they didn't realize about all these things working outside the company's network. Then there were some other decisions or even coordinating aspects that involved the different processes. And they were doing that just talking to your colleague in the desktop, in the desk next to you. But now that we're working remotely, in a way, made us finding solutions and being part of this digital transformation. So now there's no options but to formalize those processes and start providing digital support so that we can monitor work. So in a way, this year, business process management acquired a new role, let's say. So from our standpoint, BPM provides the tools that we need to automatize and model processes, but also it works as an accelerator so that we can, in fact, carry all those things out. In GeneXus, we experienced all this last year where the pandemic started last year. So part of our team in GeneXus, the Ministry of Public Health in Uruguay, and many other private companies, we were all working together in order to provide solutions or tools so that we can contribute to monitor all the COVID-19 cases. So we launched an application in which all the users, all the citizens here in Uruguay are using this app. And at that moment, they could be in contact with the health services providers to arrange dates for testing. But within the application, we have a back office where all the processes represented, all the processes conducted by the health providers. So basically, during that first week, we started with a diagram similar to this one, or maybe a little bit more complicated. It was something like this. So basically, this diagram was created by the epidemiology department of the Ministry of Health. And at that moment, we realized that we really needed to automatize all the management back office of all the cases. We needed a system focused on workflow. After 40 iterations, a little bit more maybe on that first week, we reached this process that is more linear. Using the context from the mobile application and the websites and chat box that we had in different channels, all those things defined this process here. And basically we could coordinate, I don't know, testing or just a visit to the doctor. This allowed us to work with doctors, medical doctors that are not IT experts. And we agreed on the flow, on this flow chart. And then we created an inbox. It was specific for these doctors so that they could have all the information required for the monitoring of cases, so that they could know the risk level of each person depending on their comorbidities. Hadn't we chosen to follow this process, we would have had to reinvent some of the tools available. And that helped us to start working with this in just a few days and then being able to monitor this. This is just an example that in a way, this case confirmed that we can work fast and that we have the flexibility in order to model and digitalize any model in any organization. So just to share some news about this, I wanted to go over some of the aspects of this BPM suite. One of the most important ones is the process modeling component. As you can see, we have integrated process modeling within GeneXus. It's based in BPMN. And then this modeling tool it also has a standalone version that is outside GeneXus, that is free. And right now we are working on the web modeling. Now this is part of GeneXus Web, and that is available for you to start trying it. And that will be the future of all this. This web modeling will be replacing the one we are using right now, so that we can use it everywhere, not only within GeneXus and Windows, but also in our own back office of GeneXus Flow. The other component that I think it's pretty important is the API, the workflow API that is integrated in GeneXus, and that allows you to extend the functions of the engine so that you can implement the different stages of the process through the code that you built in GeneXus. And GeneXus, of course, is the tool that we use to conceptualize and to build any of the forms or the programs associated to each of the nodes of the diagrams being modeled. Another components are these interfaces. We provide interfaces for processes, task management, traceability. Well, here I'm showing you what this interface will look in the future. What we are doing right now, it's migrating all the aesthetics components so that we can base that on the base system of Unanimo. We are not only working in changing its appearance, but also on improving usability and user experience. For instance, one of the new interfaces that was created based on those users that are more focused on inbox processing and processing pending tasks is to offer this dashboard here, when the user can quickly know which are the pending tasks, which are overdue, which are the oldest, for instance, in the inbox, so that then they can run them. Another component that we have just renewed and published is the KB Custom Client Web. This knowledge base basically is already published in Wiki. It's an open source. You can download this KB, and it will be useful to you not only to know how to build your own inbox, because there you have the code that you can use, but also it's going to be useful because you can use it as an example, so that you don't have to start from scratch if you want to create a tailor-made inbox. Not only inboxes, there we have several options in the task management platform, all these based on the Flow API. Summing up, when we talk about GeneXus BPM Suite, we're talking about all these tools working together. Modeling, process modeling, development, automatization, and integration. We use GeneXus and API workflow. And then when we have monitoring and execution, we use GeneXus Flow clients. And then we have dashboards provided in the interface. And also for statistics analysis, we have metadata from the database that can be used. So that was a short summary. So that we are all on the same page. So now, if you have any questions, please let us know. Remember that if you want to ask questions, you can open your mic.
Bueno, mientras no se genera preguntas, yo tengo ahí algunas.
So if we have no questions, we have some ready for Eugenio. The first question is, have you thought about providing support about some engines? Well, that's a topic that we are doing some research on. It's something that is part of the roadmap, probably for next year, and we do have some nodes on decision management notation. The same organization, the one that published the standard for business project management notation, there is one of these icons that you can use for the diagrams. Right now, they have a standard for all the decision tables. That is an option that we are considering, but we have not decided anything yet. But apparently, that would be the natural way, the natural path to follow. That will allow you to separate some rules that you will be using in the conditional components of the processes. And have you thought providing support task definition that are web service? Gonzalo, maybe you can answer that question. Yeah, that's part of the BPN. The kind of tasks that you have, service tasks, that is part of the roadmap, and probably we're going to be implementing that next year. Francisco Subijana, that wants to ask a question. Hello, everybody. My question is based in which is the best strategy to follow. If I already have my system built and my system is ready to work with GP Flow, which is the best way to do this? How can I move from an event-like system to processes? Do you have any advice for that? Are you talking about a monolithic system, the same KB? Yeah, monolithic in general, something that we can find. They already have these KBs used in the past. So when you have a GeneXus knowledge base, adding business processes allows you to, in a way, so that you can invoke in those processes the objects that you already have in that knowledge base. That will depend greatly on how all that is set up. But the fact that you have a diagram, you create a diagram in that knowledge base so that you have an interactive action, that you associate an ATRN, that will help you to reuse some screens or programs that you had in that system. If that is not the case, you will have to think which the form that you want to provide is for that interactive activity and build that. But always starting from the same knowledge base. That won't change the way of programming those screens. That may be a benefit. So if you have some things ready, you can reuse them, or if you don't, you can use the same knowledge base to create new interfaces so that then can be used to be invoked from the diagram. I think that a strategy could be use the same knowledge base and start creating the diagrams that will allow you to automatize the processes that will create GX flow. You have the possibility of separating the tables from the data from the main data store. If you're not interested in making some changes to the database, you can use the GX flows table. And maybe you can have a new component where you're going to be adding the new interfaces that you're going to be using from that diagram, or directly invoking things that are already done. And what happens if I have GAM? In that case, do I have to think about something specific? No, because GX Flow is compatible with GAM. So if that knowledge base, you already have GAM, then all the sync processes with the users between GAM and GX Flow, that is automatic. So you wouldn't have any problems. Gonzalo, do you want to add anything? What we recommend when you're going to be part of process conversion is not to do the whole thing at the same time, but the best way of action is to identify a process within the company, and you start with one process that is relevant but not crucial. And then as from there, remodel that, take it to production, and then start incrementing the processes. That is what it is generally suggested from the methodology standpoint. Okay, thank you. Just one more comment. I think it is important when you start working in this world of process automatization, the fact that you need to know how to model those processes. You need to take time to learn about BPMN standards. So in our training site, we have a specific course for process modeling, because the more you represent in the diagram, The more you have those things, the less you will have to program. The idea is that everything is represented in the diagram, and then each node on each task of the diagram, you will be focusing on the screen that you will be showing and the data rules that you're going to be presenting in that task. So modeling, it's important so that you can make the most of the tool. Yeah, eAPI is the same, right? What I generally see is that it is implemented through the API. Yep, yeah. Yeah, integration with other systems. Yeah, API use patterns. In general, they are the same, at least the most important ones. And this AKB that I told you about custom clients, it gives you a nice overview with real cases on how we work with the API. Any other questions from the audience? I have one question here. The process modeling in web can be used to use runtime processes. Gonzalo, we've been talking about this, so. Okay, in a first stage, no. The web processes modulator will be working as the current one. It will be working as it does today with the current one, but it is planned that one that is ready, that web modulator will be integrated within the Gflow client. That will be part of the administrators, of course. Yeah, it will be included. The diagram will be included within the client. So you will be able to do that in runtime. From the application, you will be able to model and modify processes that will be available on a second stage, probably next year, probably on the second semester of 2022. And the idea behind that is like, imagine that I have all my processes that are running in production, and I need to make some changes only at process level. I'm not changing programs, but just at flow level to eliminate a task, maybe to change a condition, or those kind of things. That gives me the possibility that in production, I can make those changes without having to go through a generation and compilation process, because I don't need to go through GeneXus. Basically, through the modulator, I will be able to edit the program and to have an impact on a new version so that it is available for users in productions when they generate more instances of that diagram can use the changes that we made. So when you need to add a new screen that requires programming or a new transaction, obviously I won't be able to use that. At least not in the first versions. I have another question. Will you have an AKB including only the client VPN mobile without having to use another case? Yeah, the idea is that we have a new project so that you can download the AKB to include the client, and we're also using the changes to design so that we can have the new theme. Any other questions? Questions from the audience? Can we use the manager from the client, enter licenses through files, or do we have to do it manually? Can you repeat that question? From the license manager of VPN, can we enter licenses through files or only manually?
Por ahora no sé, no lo tenemos en el roadmap.
I don't know. That is not included in the roadmap yet.
Pero no lo descartamos.
But it is a possibility.
Tenemos cuidado con eso por el tema de.
We are careful with that.
De poner todo lo que es el runtime de GXFlow en.
Because the runtime of GXFlow in a platform
Como servicio y
as a service, and also the issue of dealing with files, we try to minimize the use of files. That's the reason why we haven't done it yet. But there are no technical barriers to do it. When we can solve that issue in a safe way, in that kind of platform, we're going to do it. Cesar Forero asks, is it possible to customize error messages from the workflow client? Yes. All the error messages and messages in general, captions and labels of workflow clients, these are translations that are imported in AKB in the languages. So yeah, it is possible using that translation mechanism of GeneXus to modify those files and generate a text file and deploy that instead of the original messages. Yeah, you can customize those. Okay, thank you. Perfect. Another question. When would you recommend to use the new licensing? And when using server protection? We always recommend to use the native protection that is available, because protection server uses a technology that is obsolete. And it is obsolete because of the complications that it generates, port administrations and those kind of things. So we recommend using the native one. In the prototype section, we are more flexible, so we don't have to change our licenses from one place to the other, even though we have better security aspects. But once it is in production, now there's a security administrator, and using ports is a little bit more complicated. That can leave some security gaps. So in productions, we recommend to use the native one. And in prototypes, we leave the possibility open to use the others. Francisco Subijana is asking G-test. How does it relate with GXFlow? That is to say, which is the best way of creating a test for a GXFlow process? So in that case, I would recommend him to have web UI that have GX test. In fact, in our automatized test that we have, we use GX test. So GXFlow, all that interface is part of GeneXus. So the recommendation there would be to use the object of GX test to automate web tests. In fact, you have the plugin for the browser that will allow you to log in the inbox, to implement several actions. Those are recorded. And then all that script that is generated by GX test can be imported in GeneXus. And as from there, you have that test integrated in the AKB. We use that. If you find any kind of trouble, just let us know. That is what we do, as any other automatization of tests and web applications.
Tengo una nueva pregunta de César Forero.
Another question by Cesar Forero. I've got a project in GX17U5, and I want to use Unanimo for the customization of a workflow client. What do I need apart from an update from GX17U6 and import the objects of the client's workflow custom clients? Or how can I use that template? Well, that AKB already has the Unanimous resources in that base. So if you want to use that knowledge base as a base, what you're going to do is you will export those resources of JXFlow that is written in the wiki. You have the Unanimous resources, and then you have the resources of the client in GXFlow. You can import that to your own AKB and start using it. You will have to find the best strategy if you are gonna transfer all your knowledge base to Unanimo. So then default style will be Unanimo, depending on the theme that you are using. Or if you're gonna go object by object, panel by panel, telling it to use Unanimo. But in the AKB, you have all the resources. The idea is that Unanimo will be used as a module. So in that knowledge base, we have our first version of Unanimo, and that is part of the AKB, but not necessarily as a module. Some resources are not included in Unanimo's module. Now in the new versions, we're going to have everything together with the images, photos, with all the resources as a module. Any other questions, comments that you would like to make? Just continue with what Eugenio said. You need to take into account that it's a beta functionality when we're talking about Unanimo. So I wouldn't use that in production if we are in 17U6. So there will be changes. As Eugenius said, it will be a module. There may be some conversion issues. So you have to be careful with that. Especially when we are working with a U6 version. So consider that Unanimo is a beta functionality. Any other question from the audience? So if there are no further questions, then no further comments. Just one more thing. Our idea, apart from what Eugenio said, is that to have the BPMN complete. We have added new things like event management that has been enhanced in relation to timers. So now we have the timer event included so that you can start processes on a specific date or moment. Also intermediate timers. You can define cycles so they can be iterative. And we're going to be moving along those lines to complete that standard. Our next step, for instance, is service task that we're talking about today, and the possibility of including those in the processes in a more automatic way. We can do it today, but it has to be done manually. And then, as Eugenio said, also, apart from BPMN, to explore some other standards like rules engine, and also some other standards that we have already presented in some other events. So right now, we are more focused on rules engine And those aspects related to integration with the new web modulator and trying to offer a solution for GX Flow focus on services. Are products that can show the clients that they can hire the service in the cloud, so that you can use that in the cloud with a license type that includes use. Any other question? Gonzalo, regarding using GX Flow by service, I can't imagine that. How would you do that? How can you use the engine by service? So there are two options. In one option is to work in a new dynamic form editor. Basically, you will be using that without GeneXus. There's going to be a website. We're going to give you a password and a user. You're going to have access to the diagrams with the new web modulator, and you will be able to define the forms using technology GeneXus. That will be one of the formats. And the second format will be using those tools provided by GeneXus. So GeneXus will also be a service.
No sería tan natural como en el primer caso que te
It
planteo.
wouldn't be as natural as in the first case, but you will have the possibility of hiring that service in the cloud and being able to use GeneXus in the cloud.
No sé si aclaré tu pregunta.
I don't know if I answered your question. Well, I find it difficult to understand, probably because of my lack of knowledge. So tell me your scenario. What are you thinking about? Well, basically, the diagram right now, I have the tool, the standalone tool for the diagram. Yeah, but it's not in the cloud. What I'm telling you is that we will give you a server. It will be hosted by us. It will be in Amazon. That is not your problem. Don't worry. We will provide you with a site in which you will be able to enter using a user and a password. You will have access to an Xflow system with the runtime we're using today. And you will also have the possibility of using the same website, and you will be able to use the new models using the new web modulator. So basically, there I have an impact on my AKB, right? No, just forget about the AKB. You're working on a website now. You don't see GeneXus there. For you, there's no GeneXus on the website. So you just go to the GX Flow runtime and you draw the diagram. So in the business logic of GeneXus is there, you won't know that. That's our part of the business. Another possibility is that you have the diagrams in GeneXus and you want to transfer those to the cloud. In that case, we have to find the mechanisms. But in this case, you will be drawing in the cloud without using GeneXus. Francisco, I think that we are used to seeing this integrated to GeneXus. So in the process, we have many of the nodes and tasks, and you end up invoking programs that you have in GeneXus, transactions, panels. So this new scenario suggested by Gonzalo focuses on some other kind of users. What we want to do is to model a process with specific data, and you may also have attached documents to those tasks. And basically, you don't need, you don't need to have some development behind all that. The user just models the diagram, and on each task, they model forms of the kind of data that they want. So data move along the different tasks, but you are not programming. It's a no-code option. Today, we have one provided by GeneXus. This one, it's a no-code vision that is focused on that kind of companies in which some of the processes, in which it's going to be useful to have these kind of processes. We consider this for GeneXus as a platform. GeneXus Web is going to be the platform in which I can create my projects, my knowledge bases, where I can do all the setup of the development team. And then if I use the IT wing to work locally, to use to that server that I set up to use with that knowledge base, and maybe within that same knowledge base, I can include some processes. And that runtime of process management, we're going to be providing that like in a small container, in a small box. And for you, it's going to be more transparent. There are two different uses of this. One is more similar to what we're doing today, in which you model processes in that knowledge base, and then you integrate GeneXus. And in the other one, the other use scenario, you don't necessarily want to build things using GeneXus, but you have dynamic forms that will be enough for some of the processes. Okay, thank you very much. We have one more question. Questions, doubts, comments? A question is like, have you think about implementing some compatibility of calendars for timer objects that are different to the compatible definition? The idea is to use cycle timers respecting the definition of the calendar with the working hours of the company defining calendar. So once I finished the diagram, I realized that the timer is different from the timer that is compatible. The compatible timer is the only one that has the possibility of being submitted to the defined calendar. Have you thought for the rest of the timers to have something similar? Not for the moment, that is not part of the roadmap, because the calendar is not part of the standard or the languages that we use to define rules for repetitions that are also standard. So it was difficult for us to include that in our first stage. It may be in the future, but it won't in the short term. Anyway, we have workaround to use that. You can define, even though you're not including that in the task, you can define the calendar. Then you define the diagram and you set the different times and holidays. And then you can use the API for the functions and validate or ignore those activities that do not fall within those times. In a way, it's a workaround to solve that issue. Okay, thank you very much, Gonzalo. Regarding customization of messages, that you said that that's possible, changing the language. But if I want to customize the error message when I'm uploading a message that is not compatible with the format, the error message reads that there's an error in the document, but it doesn't specify if the error is due to the type of extension that the document uses. That kind of messages, can that be customized? And if it does, how? Because I couldn't find a way of customizing that error message. the message I remember reads that the file extension does not agree with the type of documents. Maybe we're talking about different things, but to your specific question, what you're saying, well, that it's not possible to modify a message for instance, you have a message. So messages are static. So you have a message. If the engine does not make it active for you, you cannot do it. They are static. If you want to say, imagine that the message is something like the type of extension is different, and you want to say the document that you uploaded is extension.com and we are expecting you to use a .pdf. If you want to say something like that, you can change it, but you will get that message for those cases and also for images. If you're using different formats of images, you can change the messages, but in the way they are defined, not for other uses. I don't know if my answer was clear. Okay, yeah, I saw that way, but I wanted to customize them. If not, it's like there's some ambiguity about which is the valid format. As you said, I was getting all the message all over the place. So if there's a message that you would like to improve, even though you cannot change it, we can send a report and we can improve the way in which that message is written. And we can modify it as part of the AKB. So if you think that there's a better message that can be used, we can modify that. We can modify it for everyone, not for you specifically. Yeah, but Cesar would like to use that message where they are different. Maybe we can do that. Yeah, because the message error, the error message when you are uploading a file with an incorrect extension, it's not very clear. And it doesn't specifically tell you that it's an extension error. It just tells you that there's something wrong with the file, but it doesn't tell you exactly what it is.
Si es de extensión, por lo menos poder definir que es un error de extensión.
So if there's something about the extension, at least I will realize about what's wrong.
Llegar como a ese nivel de detalle.
So maybe to get to more specific information, if it is a Word or a PDF file. As I told you before, I believe something about a specific message when there's a problem with the extension code. We can do what you are suggesting. We can make some changes. We have customized messages. So we can use and change the function format. We use the %1 and %2 up to n to include the different parameters to be replaced. We do have messages like that, and we can use a configuration like that so that the percentage converts into the parameter that shows the extension that is expected. But according to what you're saying, apparently it looks like an error. As I told you, there is an error message for the extension, and maybe that is not showing. So if the right message is not showing, then we had to correct that. I can stay with you, Cesar, and we can see that specific issue. What we do not say is which is the expected extension. Yeah, it is. It says that it's an extension error, and then it continues saying there was an error while uploading the file. That is the order of the messages.
si había una forma como de personalizar.
So I just wanted to know whether there was a way of customizing those error messages
Configurado.
due to the type of extension that was originally included in the documents. No, not in this case, but we can do that for the future.
Bien, perfecto.
Thank you very much.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
More questions? There's a new question in the chat. Asked by Andrea. Okay, so I would like to know whether messages can be modified through the import of a file. Can you send me information about that? I think we're talking about the same thing. It was what Gonzalo mentioned, that all the messages are part of the languages. So if you go to the language objects in the knowledge base, you will be using workflow right now. What was the prefix?
Sí.
It was XWF. That is the prefix. So if you're going to be changing the message, then you don't need to change what's behind the message, right? The idea to be communicated, even though you can say that in different ways. But when you're saying through the input of a file, that is not very clear. I mean, those messages are in files because they are GeneXus objects. When you're working with a diagram, those are imported and they include the keys of those languages with their translations. So we already have an XPS set where those labels are. You can import that in an AKB and having a file. You don't necessarily need to import anything to do that. Once you have a diagram in your AKB, that file, that is the XPZ, that is the language where all the keys are included, the AKB is imported, and that's it.
Comento eso de que en realidad también están en ese archivo.
So those are included in that file, and it's an XPZ, and there you can find the installation. You can use that in the different environments so that you can set the messages that you really want to have. I have a question about this, because what happens is that we have a multi-language application, and there are some translations that when GeneXus translates those messages, they are not using the same term. So there are some changes in the translation. So what we need is to be able to import the file with the translations and using that in runtime. So what's the problem then? That we generate a file, and in the next specification, that file is used again. So we have to be always monitoring that file, and we don't have a way of making it compatible with the right use of language. So there are two things there. First, any language that has been translated, and if the translation is not the correct one, what we do is that we have translators. In some cases, since when we don't have time, we don't use our translators. We have languages. For instance, in Arabic, we translated those terms into Arabic. Maybe Italian was the case too. Okay, let me start again. If you find some mistakes in the translation, first thing to do is to report them, and we'll make the corrections. So if there are names that are not translated correctly, we need to correct that. Something different is when we have a right translation, the right translation, but you want to modify, or you want to change the name or use a synonym, or something that you find it applies better, even if the translation is correct. So in the first case, you need to report those labels that are mistranslated, and we will correct that and make it available to everyone. In the second case, the best course of action is to go to the XPS, modify the translations, and in each installation, you run over that file where you have the keys so that you can customize the labels with the new terms. Is it clear? Which is that XPS that you mentioned? I know there's one file per language, right? Which is the XPS that you're talking about? Let me see. We can send you that.
Está en el directorio de...
I think that is in the directory of the GeneXus installation package, XPM, somewhere there. Package, XPM language, and you can go wlanguage.xpz. That has the GeneXus language objects for each of the languages, and those labels are already there. So if you imported that in some other AKB, and you customize that, and you import it again, and you generate the same file, then according to Gonzalo, in each GeneXus installation, you can use your file, so that when you have a build process, you don't lose the changes. What's going to happen is that tomorrow, if you change the program, you will have to start it over again, because there will be new labels in the new version. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem, because it can create a tool that basically would keep that file updated. Yeah, but I just wanted to find that XPC file. That is just a zip with XML. Okay, thank you very much. I had some trouble trying Arabic, and people with whom I'm working, they are from Jordan, and the translation into Arabic didn't work. I set the language for Arabic, I compiled, I looked for the properties, it didn't work, and when I clicked in Spanish, the Spanish version works all right. But in the Arabic case, it just didn't work. I wanted to ask whether importing that XPZ, I can avoid that mistake or that error, or if I need some kind of support to validate that. First thing that you need to check is that Arabic is authorized in the knowledge base. Second thing that you have to do is, because not the whole XPZ is imported. So first thing that you have to do is to check that that language is part of the AKB and with the random translation configuration. Second thing that you need to check, you need to open Arabic and look for the key, GXFlow labels, and you need to check that those labels were in fact imported. Two options there. You may have a filter that will show you if the labels are internal or not. You have to check that so that it includes all the labels. If the labels are not there, then you may do that manually. Maybe it was an issue that it just didn't upload that. Let's imagine that you have the labels, but you cannot see them. Maybe it's related to the generator. You need to report that. I think that with a rebuild, you regenerate the resources, and that would be a solution. A third possibility is to go over the generated files. In the case of net, we generate files that are binary. In the case of Java, I don't know, it's English dot, I can't remember now. Those are text files. And those are generated through sources, and you can check whether they are available or not. If they are not there, it can be a generator issue. You can use the rebuild to solve that problem.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Then also about Arabic, the support is not 100% complete. It's not only a label thing, but also visualization issues. Now that we are working in the conversion using Unanimo, we're going to solve that problem. To have a screen for Arabic is not only, as you know, it's not only about converting the labels, but also the order in which things are shown. So the menu needs to be changed because we're not reading from left to right. So there are some issues that need to be solved. And we're going to try to solve that with the new version. Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, cool, we ran out of time. Thank you very much for being here. I would like to thank all the team for your time. Remember that this webinar is uploaded in our site. So you will find this on the GeneXus website. So see you in the next event. There's one more question. SSO in GXFlow, seeing GAM, is it possible to do that with Google or any other IP? No, it's not possible. We use GAM, and that is the only way we're going to do it, because more and more people are using GAM, and we're not going to be reinventing the wheel. So we don't provide support to that, and it's not part of the roadmap. The way of integrating external authentications, it's through GAM. Okay, perfect. Okay, see you in the next event. Bye-bye.